If you and your spouse are struggling to co-parent with their former partner and you're not exactly sure where else to turn for help, today's episode is for you.
I'm Cameron. I spent years building my career and creating a life I loved. And when my Prince Charming finally showed up, he had 4 kids in tow. Fast forward through lots of mistakes made and lessons learned, step-family life was much more complicated than I realized. If you're looking for help with blended family life, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Stepmom Diaries, where we keep it real as we dish about all the things. This is your weekly dose of blended family inspiration and encouragement. You're not the wicked stepmother, so let me help you find your fairy tale ending. Come on, let's do this.
Today's guest works in an area that is truly beneficial for stepfamilies, and that is helping households co-parent with each other. Before we get started, could I ask you for a very quick favor? Would you be willing to head over to iTunes and leave me a rating, or better yet, a review? It really will just take a few seconds, and literally every rating and review I can get helps me reach more and more stepmoms just like you. Okay, let's talk about today's guest. Davie has found a way to help co-parents that doesn't require a high-conflict co-parent to even be part of the process. She founded Co-Parenting Peacefully in 2021, where she helps co-parents, biological parents, and step-parents become the best versions of themselves and protect their peace. Katie has an undergraduate degree in psychology, has studied at the High Conflict Institute, and is a certified coach. Her ebook, Your Guide to Co-Parenting with Boundaries, is available online, and I'll link to it in the show notes, which you can find at thiscustomlife.com/episode 60. This is a great discussion if you're struggling to co-parent with the other household, and I'm so excited to jump into it. Katie, hello, welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Yay, thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Yes. And for you listeners, Katie and I have been trying to make times work on this for a couple of months. So I'm super excited that we finally both could work our schedules out for her to be here. This is fantastic.
I'm so happy. It was crazy, but we got it done.
Yes. So I think before we start in on any of the co-parenting stuff, Katie, I always like to ask my stepmom guests to tell me a little bit about their origin stories, so to speak. And you're not a stepmom, but you are a bio mom. So I know you have got lots of experience dealing with, blended family dynamics. So tell everybody a little bit about your background and sort of how you got here.
Oh my goodness. As I'm sure it is for everyone, it's a long story, but my co-parent and I have been apart for about 6 years, and we really, really struggled at the beginning. It was craziness, chaos, anger all the time. Nobody was happy. I'm sure you all can relate. So it has been a constant work for me, on my end at least, to kind of get to a place where we're at least comfortable, but still mostly parallel parenting. And that was where coaching came from. I was so excited to teach people that you can do this, and it doesn't there's no one right way to co-parent. There's no one right way to have a blended family. There are so many different options, and it felt like no one was saying that. And the only version we were getting was we all have to hold hands at the baseball field, and we have to go out for dinner. And I'm so happy to be able to present other options for people.
Isn't that the truth? And I love hearing you use that example, because I feel like I always see on social media these, blended families where it's you have, stepmom and bio mom and dad or mom or whoever, and everybody's, on vacation together or at the games together and, wearing matching shirts or whatever. And then it kind of just makes you feel like a failure if that's not your dynamic. And I know for so many stepmoms that are listening to this, that is not their dynamic. So it's so nice to hear you say that it's normal for you not to feel like kumbaya with the other house.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, I don't think my co-parent and I will ever get there. We can now do a couple of things together here and there, but we're definitely not ever going to be besties. So, and that's okay.
And that's okay. That's exactly right. That wherever you are with your dynamic, it's okay. So you mentioned parallel parenting, and that's something I've talked a little bit about on the podcast and have we've talked a little bit about at the Stepmom Summit and other places. But for people listening, tell us a little bit about the difference between, what we think of as co-parenting and what parallel parenting is, and maybe how how did you decide to make that switch from trying to shove it into like the co-parenting model versus moving into the parallel parenting? Because sometimes it's a really great solution for people.
Yeah. And I think too, I just posted about this on my Instagram page a couple of days ago, but I think people can kind of flex and flow. And I think they can take different portions of like maybe co-parenting and parallel parenting and kind of mesh them together. So my co-parent and I it became obvious that we needed to head towards parallel parenting pretty early, but I wasn't ready to accept that. So I was still trying to force like all of the kumbaya, let's be besties kind of thing until I realized that really what works for the two of us is limited communication, limited contact, collaborating only about like medical, dental, like the really important things that are going to keep our kids healthy, collaborating about those things, and then not collaborating about anything else. He does whatever he wants on his time. I do whatever I want on my time. We don't really talk to one another. We can go weeks. We can go probably a month without talking to each other. And we also don't communicate a lot with our kids when our kids are with the other parent. So there's a lot of separation in the homes, which I think when you think about parallel parenting is kind of the dynamic. There's just separation between both homes, and that can be okay.
Tell me a little bit about how that works with the kids. And I guess maybe to take a step back, how many kids and the ages and stuff like that? Because I know with ours, we do sort of a combination of co-parenting and parallel parenting, sort of dependent on the child, because we've got one with special needs and that's sort of a different situation. But especially as the kids get older, it's a little easier to do the parallel parenting because you can kind of convey information. You can sort of decide with the child and they have more input and stuff like that. But how does that work with the communication? Because I've seen, as ours have gotten older, the communication directly with the child when they're at the other house is a little easier because they've got phones and, they'll pick up the phone and call just to say hi or whatever. And I don't know, how has that worked for you?
So I think when we're talking about communication between the kids and myself, or the kids and their dad, they're 7 and 9 now. I have a boy and a girl. And they were, what were they, like 1 and 3 when we split. So they were very little. But the communication between parent and child for us has always been pretty limited, not because we don't want to talk to our kids, but because they don't really want to talk to us. and they were really little, and getting them to sit for those phone calls was like chaos, and nobody wanted to do it.
That age.
Yeah. So now that they're older, we just kind of fly by. If you want to call dad, great. Here's my phone. If you want to call mom, great. Here, go call her. But it's not like nobody gets mad. If I don't hear from my kids the whole time they're with their dad for 5 days, okay. I assume if something crazy happens, someone will call me. No news is good news kind of a thing. So that's kind of that's how we settled on that. And then the communication between my co-parent and myself, our kids were 1 and 3 when we split. So there needed to be more communication, but we literally could not do it face to face or on the phone. Even like emails were hard. Texting was a nightmare. So we just passed a notebook back and forth in a daycare backpack. That was the best we could do. That was what worked. And I think that for us, having that limited amount of communication when the kids were little, that helps now, because now we're like, okay, great. See you next week.
Yeah. And sometimes that's the best it's going to get. And I actually have made that suggestion to a lot of stepmoms, that a notebook going back and forth, like sometimes that's the path of least resistance is sometimes the most successful path. You know what I mean?
And I think that people look at that as a failure. Like, oh, we can't even talk to each other. But is it really a failure? Or is it you guys all protecting yourselves and your own mental health, and then in turn protecting your kids from all the chaos?
And protecting the kids. And that's, I think that the most important thing that I see, and I'm sure you must also, is, parents that are kind of fighting it out either in front of the kids or saying stuff to the kids that's really damaging about the other parent. And if you can kind of keep it in that little notebook where it's like just the facts, and the facts go back and forth, then you can kind of take that other stuff off the table. And then the kids don't have to hear, mom or dad being criticized or see tense exchanges, when at pick up and drop off. And it just kind of takes the temperature down a little bit, I feel like.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we started doing preschool daycare exchanges the moment we started exchanging the kids because we couldn't even be in the same space. And I think the notebook is great because you're not going to sit there and handwrite 87 things. You're going to bullet it and that's it. But you're texting and that goes on for an eternity.
Of course. And it's so hard. It's so easy to assume tone and stuff over text and email that may or may not be there. And then that creates problems. And, it just, and of course, like when you're working with your co-parent, you know which buttons to push and they know which buttons to push with you. And then it just declines. And, how do you feel about I know there are a lot of apps out there for communicating with co-parents. How do you feel about those?
I think they can be really, really great for some people. I know a lot of people who use them. We never did because we pretty quickly were like, okay, the communication has got to be dialed down. And I, to be honest, did most of the setting and enforcing boundaries in that area. And my co-parent eventually came along. But I think they can be great. I think they're a great resource. And I don't think there's any reason that anyone should feel ashamed to use them.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, so how did you get into coaching co-parents?
So this is kind of like a long story, but I'll make it short. I decided that there were not enough resources for people who wanted to co-parent peacefully, but couldn't do it in a traditional way. So I set up my Instagram page and thought I'll just teach people kind of how I did it and kind of where I am now versus where I started. And then someone reached out to me and said, hey, have you ever thought about coaching? And no, I had not, but that's kind of where it all got started. So I got a life coaching certification and here we are.
And you've worked with the High Conflict Institute.
I've done a little bit of a few courses with them. I have my mediation stuff done for the state of Colorado. I have a bachelor's in psychology. So all of this kind of like led me to, this seems like it would be a good fit because I do have experience with it. And I'm just so tired of everyone feeling like they have to do it one way.
Yeah, totally. And that's, the blessing and the curse of blended families is that they are all different and they're all unique and there's no one single kind of solution that fits all of them. So I think it's so wonderful that you're out there working to try and improve that dynamic. So
it's so fun.
Most of the women listening to us today are stepmoms, and stepmoms, have a little bit of a different role in all of this, right? Like they're not the co-parent with the other house. They're the co-parent in their own house, right? So what if there is like a high conflict relationship with the other house or, difficulty if their partner's having a hard time communicating with their former partner? What's the best way that you think that step parents can kind of contribute to a peaceful, less chaotic co-parenting existence?
Oh, I love this question so much. Okay. So I always feel like, at least what I see from my coaching clients, I don't know kind of what you might see, is that the stepmoms just really want to be involved. They really want to help. They really want to be a part of the kid's life because they love them. But then there's like this competition piece sometimes from bio mom, and that just like wreaks havoc on the whole thing. So I really think, and I don't think this is possible always, but I think if you can have a conversation with your partner about expectations, what level of involvement do I need to have in parenting our child? Because, they are your kids too. People get mad at me when I say that, but I think that they're everybody's kids, right? But I
love that you're saying that because you're a bio mom saying that. Like you're saying, hey, if stepmom comes into the picture or whatever, that you want them to kind of share in that parenting role, that they do have a role.
Yes, I'm really close to my co-parent's partner, and we always call them our kids. Like, when she helps, I'll say, thank you so much for watching our kids and loving our kids. I think that's so important to make you're supposed to be a cohesive unit. And I know you can't always be, but if you can be, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So I think having an open conversation with your partner about how do I fit into this role? And also I think that having conversations with your partner about boundaries that you need enforced in your own home to feel safe and like this bio mom is not in your house all the time is super important. And then boundaries for your relationship with your partner. When are you talking about your bio mom? When are you, all of that contributes to how your relationship functions. So I think those are really important too.
I love that. I think boundaries are such an important tool, and it's so hard to really figure out what they should be and how to set them. And that's something that's just so useful for blended families to have help with, because it really, especially when there's a high conflict situation, setting those boundaries can really, really make the difference with kind of keeping your own peace,
100%. And I feel like sometimes stepmoms don't really have like a high conflict bio mom issue as much as they have we haven't set boundaries with my partner, or I haven't set boundaries with my partner, and we haven't figured out how this is going to cohesively come together yet. Because I think for a lot of my clients, when we work through that and their partner is a willing participant, then the high conflict situation outside of their home lessens, just because, their partner is kind of dealing more with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And they should be the ones to deal with it. So you talk a little bit about helping people co-parent even when the high conflict co-parent can't be a part of the process. So like that you can help people regardless of that, when that may be what you were alluding to just now. But tell me a little bit more about what that looks like.
Oh my gosh, it's so much fun. So my focus is always on what can you do on your end to lessen the conflict, to lessen the crazy, to lessen the chaos. And so that looks a lot like us. What does communication need to look like? What do boundaries need to look like? What do managing expectations, like what does that look like for you? Because that's a big one. Kind of focusing on your own path and then taking that path and making it work for your kids and you and your co-parent, but mostly you and your kids.
Because at the end of the day, that's all you can control is what happens in your house, right? Like if the other house is super high conflict and, has a tendency to blow things up when they get involved, of course, it's not like you can go to them and say, I think you're kind of high conflict. How can we resolve this? That's not going to, you know what I mean? That's not an option. So yeah, it's like figuring out sort of how your peace can be kept. So what kinds of discussions around expectations and role do you have with, people who are really struggling with the co-parenting?
Yeah, a lot of times that looks like, tell me what their pattern of behavior is. Tell me what you can actually reasonably expect from them. Like you're expecting this over here, this, if I do this, then they will do this, but that's never how it works. So what happens if you remain consistent and then you don't worry so much about what your co-parent does? If you feel good and you're following the order, your kids are healthy, then why are we doing the if then game? Why are we not just doing what works for us? So that's kind of one of the more central pieces is figuring that part out of it and then managing, because chaos comes with that. You make big changes and your co-parent loses it because they don't know what's happening. They can sense a change like, oh my God. So kind of all of that. But I really think everybody has to focus on doing what works for them and their kids.
How often have you seen, somebody that you're working with that where the other house is super high conflict and they kind of, they can get their house in order, but then you have all the crazy swirling over there. Like, do you often see like a demonstrable difference when they can kind of get their calm under control, even when, the crazy is still swirling at the other house?
Yeah, there is a huge difference. Typically, I think because you're living in your own house, in your own world, and you at least have some semblance of peace. You have some form of like, I can control only my bubble and they can try to pop my little bubble. But if I'm managing my expectations and managing my emotions and talking to my partner and, all the things are tied up on my end, then there's little that they can do on their end. Of course, we're not like taking into account alienation and things like that, but which is a whole other thing. But it really does help their side of things if they can just kind of get
so true. It's so true. And it's hard. I mean, it's really easy to talk about, getting your expectations in line and enacting really great boundaries and, staying calm and serene in the moment. But then, when something happens, it's hard to sort of say, okay, that's outside of my little zone of control. I'm going to let it go.
So hard. It took me a very long time. And every now and then, I mean, I think it's important too to note that even people who've been doing this for a really long time, it's been 6 years, I still have moments where I'm like, what the crap? I don't understand. Why are we doing this again? But then it's like, I'm able to just get it under control so much sooner, realize that my co-parent's going to do whatever my co-parent's going to do. And I'm sure I tick him off sometimes too. I'm sure there are days he's like, why is she doing this again? You know, I think it's important to, at least for me, to recognize my co-parent probably has some of the same feelings about me that I have about him. So,
yeah,
you know?
Yeah. I love it. So you have got, what you're calling the big book of boundaries and scripts that you provide for people with 200 scripts. Is that right? With co-parenting and boundary areas. That's amazing.
Yeah. I kind of compiled all of the areas that my clients have a difficult time with. And there are so many, like finances, child support, lawyers, court threats, all the things, parenting time. And I just came up with a bunch of different scripts that I've had clients use or that I've used, and they're all in there. And I mean, I've had like 300 purchases so far, and everybody loves it. So not to toot my own horn, but it seems to be a good resource for people. I'm getting good feedback.
That's fantastic. So I'm going to put a link to that in the show notes, which will be at thiscustomlife.com/episode 60. So if you're listening, you can go to that link and you can get a hold of Katie's big book of boundaries and scripts, which I think sounds like just a huge resource. And tell us, before we stop, tell us how people can find you, how they can work with you.
Yeah. So you can find me at coparentingpeacefully.com or on Instagram. I love Instagram. Is such a great place. I love to interact with people in DMs and kind of do polls and figure out what content you want to hear. So those are probably the two best places.
I love it. I will put all of those links in the show notes. Katie, thank you so much. This was so fun.
Oh my gosh, so fun. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, and such a great resource for people.
Thank you.
That's it for this week. If you've enjoyed our chat, I hope you'll help spread the word. Share this episode with friends and head on over to wherever you listen to podcasts and leave me a review. And don't forget, for more great stepmom content, head on over to thiscustomlife.com and follow me on social media. Just search This Custom Life on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest. Until next time, you keep being you and know that we are in this together. See you here next week.